You're listening to Keeping Up with the Knights, a podcast for the faculty and staff at Steele High School, allowing them to connect outside of the classroom. Teacher, coach, mentor, and speaker Michael Herrera, a past District Teacher of the Year, will sit down with fellow teachers and bring their stories to life. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these stories as they unfold on this episode of Keeping Up with the Knights.
Welcome back, Knight Nation, to another episode of Keeping Up with the Knights. I am your host, Coach Michael Herrera, and I get the privilege of sitting down with Jackie Schneider. Thank you for taking time out of your day on a Friday when we could be grading and doing lesson plans for next week. So thanks for sitting down with me today.
Oh, no problem at all.
All right. So as we've talked about before, I always like to start my episode with what I call bell ringers. Just an opportunity for us to get to know each other by asking some shallow-ended questions. So I'm going to shoot 5 at you, and then it'll be your turn to 5 shoot back at me. So first question. Hopefully you've listened to an episode, but if you haven't, the first question is always the same. So if you were to go back in time and high-five yourself for something, what would you go back in time and high-five yourself for, and why?
I think it would have to be for doing my master's. My dad has his master's, but my mom was just a high school graduate. Not that that diminishes anything, but she went school was a struggle for her. And I know that it made her really proud that I went and I did that. And so it's something that is one of my best accomplishments. So I think that that's what it would be. Now,
did your dad, what did he get his master's in?
He has his master's in engineering.
Okay. And then did that kind of have any influence on you to get one, or is that something that you just kind of wanted to do anyway?
It did. I come from 2 very different families in the sense that my mom's side is Hispanic. My grandparents were immigrants. My mom's one of 9. So some of her siblings went to college, others went straight into the workforce. And it was just kind of one of those things that it was your typical family that came in. She picked cotton, the whole thing that you can imagine. My dad's side, both of my grandparents, my grandmother and my grandfather had degrees. My dad got his master's. So my dad is white. It's a very different sense.
Right.
So I had that side that kind of always, it's not an expectation. It wasn't mandatory, but it was one of those things. It was just there. And then I felt like it really made my mom proud.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just coming from those 2 backgrounds too, sets you apart from the common person who even has both parents that are degreed or both parents that are not. You kind of were able to formulate your own, thoughts and opinions and strengths from both sides. I was the first one to get my master's in my family, period. And then followed suit. My sisters decided to get theirs too. And so anyway, I always like to ask that question. All right, question number 2. Right here. Okay. What's one thing that you learned about yourself during COVID? So, rewind to this time last year, about the same time. From then until, let's say, like summer time frame, we were all hit with COVID, right? In the sense of education, personal life, whatever. But we also had some time on our hands to be home with children, spouses, or whatever. What's something that you either picked up on or that you learned about yourself through that time?
I think it would be that while I enjoy being home, and there's the weekends where I'm absolutely fine to just sit on the couch and spend family time or whatever, I don't like being home all the time. Going outside and doing stuff, that's one thing that we as a family did, is at the very least to go hang out in the backyard and just be able to get outside of just the inside was a big thing that I kind of realized I need that variation in my life.
Have you kept doing that? Even though, although we're not back to normal, I think there's a sense of normalcy with COVID right now, and we're comfortable with, the way life has been dealt to us for this past school year. Do you find yourself making that a routine now?
Oh, absolutely. And anybody who sees my husband's social media knows we're always outside grilling or crawfish boiling or whatever. Yep. And our daughter just turned 3 this week. So she's especially in that mode of, she's an active one who likes to be doing things. So jumping on the trampoline and riding around in her car outside, it's just all of those things. Yeah. So we definitely have probably increased it a lot.
That's awesome. And I hope that everybody has done that. I know we have, certainly as a family, taking hikes. We took, daily hikes during that time. And we certainly, like today, when we get home, we're going to go on our hike. It's just part of what we do. But had COVID not happened, I think we get so used to just going home and sitting on the couch watching TV and being with the kids or whatever. But I think it gives us that heightened awareness of what it feels like to get outside and go be together as a family. So that's awesome. All right. Question number 3. What was the last show that you recorded on your DVR?
Grey's Anatomy.
All right. Now, I don't know this answer, actually. Is Grey's Anatomy still producing new episodes?
Yes. So the speculation is if it's the last season or not.
Okay. So we're at that point right now.
Yeah.
I got you. All right. Okay. You got any pets?
2 dogs.
All right. Names?
Our first one is Lucia, which Steve actually bought her for me for our wedding present.
Okay.
So she is named after our honeymoon in St. Lucia.
All right.
And then our other dog is our little wiener dog, Khaleesi, because of course we loved Game of Thrones. So.
Okay. You ever take your dogs to the park and let them roam around or anything like that?
Lucia has been. Khaleesi has not. She's so small that it's she's only 7 pounds. So that's not one that we've really ventured out to do. She's still kind of puppy-ish, slowly getting to that adult, but probably this summer I would imagine that we probably could.
So do you ever go to the dog park and see a dog that looks like yours and take one home that's not yours?
Not a dog park.
Oh, not a dog park? Do tell.
No. One time when my dog got groomed, they gave me the wrong dog and she looked the exact same. So
okay.
It's a joke inside the coach's office. Yes.
So same color, same everything, huh?
Everything. Yes.
And you took the dog home?
Yeah.
So when did you figure it out?
After about 10 minutes of being home. So.
So you probably called the dog by name?
She acted the same in the car too, just huddled up on me like my dog would. And yeah. So.
Wow. All right. And so you didn't get charges pressed against y'all for stealing someone else's dog or anything
like that? It was their fault. They realized whenever I finally ended up coming back, they were they had no idea what to say. So
wow.
Ironically, about a month later, management changed. So yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, good story. All right. Question number 5 for you, as I know you guys do. What was the last concert y'all went to?
Steve went to one more recently than I did.
All right. So then what about you?
Okay. Well, I can tell you this. We have one planned coming up. How about that?
Go ahead. Yeah, that sounds good.
So for both his birthday, but also for Mother's Day gift, Gomez is taking us to Clint Black. So,
oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Good old Clint Black, man.
Yes.
Gotta love that country. Where is this one at?
Whitewater.
Okay. All right. Well, good stuff. All right. Well, those are my 5 questions. Your turn. Shoot away.
Okay. So kind of starting off, let's say with that one, what would be your favorite music artist and why?
Definitely Mercy Me. I love Christian music. And Mercy Me is just, there's a lot of story behind that group, but I'll give you a very short of an answer as possible. Growing up Catholic, being in a Hispanic family with my father and my mother, but they got divorced, but my mother continued to stay Catholic and not go Greek Orthodox because we're also Greek. I just kind of grew up in the Catholic Church, and it's very old fashioned. It's very prim and proper, and it just personally didn't really do much for me as I got older. But I went through all the, confirmations and first communions and all that kind of stuff. But when I went to college, I met a girl, started dating her, and she would take me to her church, and it was Baptist. And then pretty soon I realized there's this world out there that I never knew existed because I just realized that or I thought everything was like Catholicism. And I was just amazed at someone standing up, playing a guitar and drums at church, and that blew me away. And so I started learning Christian music and realizing that you didn't open up a hymnal from the 1300s, and I fell in love with that style of being able to listen to, worship music. And so on my birthday, 1999, And my birthday is on Wednesday, by the way. 1999, Mercy Me played at a free concert at the University of Tulsa. Have you guys watched the movie I Can Only Imagine?
Oh, many times.
Okay, so you're familiar with it. So you're in the movie, you know how they basically show how Bart and his crew were traveling around the country doing free concerts.
Right.
That was in the late 90s, precisely when I was in Tulsa. And so I was part of that movie per se, because they did a free concert at the University of Tulsa and they only had one CD out at the time.
Wow.
And I'll just never forget just talking and hanging out with Mercy Me and the group and the band and having conversations like you and I are, because they weren't Mercy Me at that time.
Yeah.
It was just a bunch of dudes singing. And I just fall in love with their music. And they actually sang the song I Can Only Imagine at that, and it wasn't even on CD yet. So that movie, that group, that kind of music, it resonates with me. But don't get me wrong, I love my country music, I love my R&B, my hip hop, my rap, my rock, whatever, but Christian's always kind of my fallback.
I've seen Mercy Me in concert too, and it's amazing. It's just, you can't describe it until you've actually been a part of it.
Have y'all gone recently to one of the concerts?
They played at my church whenever I was growing up. So It was just kind of after everything happened. The church that I grew up in was a huge Baptist church in San Antonio. It is no longer that church anymore, but they used to house a lot of those types of groups and everything to be able to come. So
yeah, we just went not last year, the year before, to go see Mercy Me in concert. Me and Courtney did. So, and I'm actually going to Lauren Daigle here pretty soon.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one. What's your biggest fear?
I'll tell you what my biggest fear was. My biggest fear was that my wife and I were not going to be able to have children. I grew up in a big family and everyone had children, nieces and nephews. And that's always been a big part of our family is family, and having kids and taking care of kids. My twin sister, I don't know if you know, but I had a twin sister, but my twin sister had a baby when she was 17 in high school. And I can remember, my senior year, waking up at 5:30 to help my sister and feed him and take care of him. And then I would get ready for cross country practice and I'd go to school at, 6:00 in the morning to go run. So kids have always been a big part of my life. And for whatever reason, like you tell yourself things so many times over and over, it becomes your truth, even though it's not. And for whatever reason, I just kept telling myself and I don't know why, we can't explain these things. I would just tell myself that I would not be able to have children. And, yeah, God told me otherwise, because we're very blessed and we're very fortunate to be able to have kids as quickly as we did. And I know there's others that struggle or can't have kids. And my sister is 48 years old right now, getting ready to have her first child. She wasn't able to have her own child, but she's been able to get a donor and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just a big part of our family. And I just built up this fear of not being able to have kids, and obviously overcame that fear.
Oh, that's a huge fear and something that I had to go through and experience. It's not a secret, amongst everybody here, that we had to go through IVF to have Sophia. And so I can completely understand that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, okay. This one, I'm kind of curious where you go with it.
Okay.
If you didn't go to tech, where would you have gone?
A&M.
Why?
Love it. I've always been a fan. I've always been a fan of A&M. I went to 3 schools. I toured A&M, UT. Matter of fact, I went to UT first, then I went to A&M, and then I went to Texas Tech. As soon as I walked on campus at UT to do my master's, I was done. There was no welcoming feeling whatsoever. I've probably felt like a peon does on an athletic team. Like a nuisance when I was there to find out if I was going to go study exercise physiology, and the school for exercise physiology and the master's program is amazing at UT. A lot of people that write textbooks for what I was studying were the professors there. So I was like, okay, I don't care about Longhorns and gig 'em, and I wanted to go study, and I want to go to the right place that's the right fit. As soon as I went to A&M, just fell in love with it. I would have gone there for my undergrad, but my entire high school was going to A&M, and I didn't want to deal with that. And I was a more mature young man than a lot of people. And I had friends, but they weren't close friends because they did things that I didn't really partake in. And I just wanted to go somewhere where nobody knew who I was. So I was like, all right, let me give A&M another chance, and fell in love with it. But actually, Texas Tech is the one that offered me a lot of money, scholarship
Yeah.
money, grant money. I was a grad assistant there as well. So I got to teach at Texas Tech, and that's kind of how I met my wife. So, I'm Red Raider, but still have a passion for A&M and still enjoy going there.
Well, I can appreciate that. So, okay. Which would you rather do? Time travel to the past or time travel to the future, and why?
God, because they're both.
I mean, you've seen Back to the Future, I assume, the whole series, so you know which way it could go.
Oh, of course. But it's like, do I go back in time and change some things, or do I go into the future to make sure things are okay? And that's my dilemma currently, because I'm like, okay, I've got kids now. Okay, I'm going to go with the way I'm leaning, because I'm leaning towards the future. I would want to go to the future so that way I could fix or change things now that may have a domino effect later in life.
I do the same. So
Yeah. Wow, I feel really like philosophical answering that question, but
I purposely picked one that was going to be a little bit of a curveball. So, okay, and then last one, what would you say you're most proud of?
Wow. There's so many, but most proud, it's going to have to be with my marriage and with children. Because overcoming that fear and actually having a child and to be able to hold, as you have, your own flesh, and whether they're crying or smiling, there's nothing that beats into this world of having a child. And it just brings so much comfort and joy to call one your own. And, I have two. And so I'm most proud of being able to be a father, and now celebrating 16 years of marriage. And I hope that continues, and I pray that continues. So that's what I would say I'm most proud of.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, those are your 5 questions. Thank you for participating in Bell Ringers. Next question I have for you is just talk about your childhood. Like, where did you grow up? Where are you from? And what your life was like, through up until your high school years.
So born and raised San Antonio. Like I said earlier, Hispanic mom, white dad. My dad, whenever I was young, actually the company he was working for, it went under. So he had to figure out how to, of course, provide for the family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My brother, who was my half brother, my mom's son, but my dad raised him, were almost 13 years apart. So when he graduated high school, I was starting kindergarten. So he moved out, the whole thing, 18, and kind of did his own thing. So even though I have a sibling, I was raised as an only child, basically. Mm-hmm. My dad started his own company, and he did government contracts. The biggest one that he did that he was with for years was with Northrop Grumman. And he was one of the head engineers on creating a lot of the naval ships. So USS New York is one of the most prominent that he did. He was in Ohio for a short time, but the majority of my childhood, including into high school, he was in New Orleans. So I grew up for a month at a time, not seeing my dad. Mm-hmm. And then I'd see him for a weekend, and we would repeat. And then as he was able to kind of progress to where he got, it eventually in high school got to me seeing him Thursday through Sunday, and then he would fly out to New Orleans. So my mom really carried the burden of everything. Luckily for her, I was a pretty good kid. So I didn't really get into trouble at all. I was afraid to ever have a parent call home.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a private school. That was one thing that
Which one?
St. George.
Okay.
So went to St. George 1st through 8th grade. Went to San Antonio Christian first semester of my high school. Hated it. I was the new girl along with some others, and I just experienced kind of the catty girl stuff, if you will.
Yeah.
I was a competitive gymnast all the way up until then. I tried out for cheerleading because I mean, that's what they had. And I was the first one to make varsity cheerleader as a freshman. And the girls that had been there for all those years that were really popular didn't like that because they made JV. And it just wasn't a good fit. And so I finally ended up actually going to public school, which was so different. I mean, you're talking about my classes were only like at the most 50 of a class, and for more than 20 in a classroom. And so it was really different. So I went to Churchill. I got to choose between Churchill and Reagan, and I chose Churchill. And it was fun. I was in a lot of stuff. I did dance. I was a diver there. I did theater. I definitely enjoyed my time, but I was ready to graduate.
So we have some similarities. We may or may not have had this discussion before, but I went to St. Pius. Mm-hmm. So I went kindergarten through 8th grade and then went to MacArthur public school. So we had kind of like that similar lifestyle where you go from a small school to knowing absolutely everybody all the way down to kindergarten. Even though you're in 8th grade, you like know all the little kids too, to going to have you ever seen that movie Dangerous Minds?
Oh, many times.
Okay. So like my first year in high school going to MacArthur, that's what I felt like I went into, like an episode or a movie, Dangerous Minds. People were throwing airplanes. They were talking when the teacher was talking. And I think that's why I am the way I am. People call me strict. No, I'm just like firm, and I want you to follow rules like that. That goes from our upbringing in Catholic schools or Christian schools is they teach you discipline, and it was just really weird once I got to public school.
Yes.
But so when did you graduate from Churchill?
2004.
In 2004. Okay. Yeah. All right. You're a Charger. All right. Question number 2. Okay. So in high school, you had interest. You said that you danced, you cheered, you did theater, all that kind of stuff. But academically, in your high school time, what did you have aspirations of becoming?
Speech pathologist, actually. Okay. That was what I was really interested in. I was interested in actually learning how to sign. I just found all of that. I liked it all. It changed once I went to college, but that was kind of my gear. I really liked the science fields. Yeah. My problem is I am not good at math. I'm just not, and that was my struggle. And I kind of figured out pretty quick that I would have to work really, really hard. And I still kind of questioned whether or not I would be able to accomplish it just because that's just not my thing.
And so at some point, obviously, so where did you go to college?
Texas State.
You went to Texas State and you decided to major in
speech pathology. And then I went my first semester because we had to go ahead and take the intro. The professor was horrible. I mean, he didn't teach well. It's like he wanted people to drop the program. So there were 30 of us that started, and we found out after that first semester that we would have to take 3 additional classes with only that professor.
Oh, geez.
Out of 30 students, only 3 remained in the program.
Wow.
Solely because of that professor.
So he was killing the program.
He was. It was sad because it's almost like he was close to retirement and almost just didn't care and just didn't connect. And I don't know, but yeah, it was really sad.
What a lesson to learn though for us though in education, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Know when it's time and either make the decision to change personally and continue with the job, or something needs to change.
Yes.
And then so did you switch your major?
So I did. I've always loved dance, so I wanted to switch it to dance.
Okay.
My parents were not on board with that. They just felt like it would get to the point where I would regret it. There was just something would happen. So the compromise was you can, but you would have to major in something else as well. I was fortunate enough that my dad was able to pay for my education. So scholarships, grants, any of that, we didn't qualify for grants, but then he also was able to pay for my school. And that was one of the things he said, if you want to do that, then I will pay for you to have a second degree as well. But I was also the student that I've never necessarily loved going to school. So I did hours upon hours every semester to try and be done quickly. And ultimately, I've always been good in English. And I said, okay, well, let me do English, because I felt like everybody jokes, oh, you're an English major, you're going to be a teacher. It's always a joke, right? But the reality is that there's plenty of other things. I know so many lawyers that did English bachelors. Yep. Or, I mean, if you want to end up going into any type of editing, or, I mean, just there's so many things. So I kind of figured I'm good at that. Let me do that. And then I just ended up majoring in dance along with it. So I got both degrees.
How long did it take you?
How
How long did it take you? Yeah.
It took me slightly longer only because I didn't find out until 2 semesters before I graduated. Texas State had this weird rule while I was there that if you had dual degrees, because my dance is a BS, but then English is a BA, oh, well, you have to have 175 hours to graduate. Stupid rule. So I had 15 more hours I had to tack on quickly. So I did my minor in mass communications. Okay. And it took me 4.5 years to do all of that.
Shoot, but that's still 4.5 years to get
yeah.
dual degrees is freaking amazing.
Yeah.
So after Texas State, you graduate.
And I stayed.
And did what?
I did my master's immediately afterwards.
Oh, full time then. So you took 9 hours.
Mm-hmm. I did. My last semester before student teaching, I actually took 15 hours in my master's.
Okay. And then let's fast forward. So you graduate. Take me through your journey between then and Steele.
I was actually at MacArthur for my student teaching, had a fantastic English teacher. It was her last year. She was senior class sponsor, and she taught me a lot, both with English and how to do that type of stuff. It's funny you say about dangerous minds in MacArthur. My first day of student teaching, I walk out of the classroom and there's these 2 seniors, they're huge, and they're punching each other to the point where one of them had all the way down to their eye socket, was like, you could see it. So I was like, I don't know what to do here. Luckily there was a teacher that was there and he broke him up and had blood all over him and everything. I was like, so this is what I'm getting into.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They don't prepare you for that in college.
Yeah. Where's that in the textbook?
But yeah, I was really great there. I was lucky. One of the administrators was actually my administrator at Churchill when I was in high school. So I had hopefully a job lined up there, but they were having to fill coaches positions, as we all know. I mean, you have to fill those first. So whenever I left, I interviewed actually at Alamo Heights for a cheerleading coach. It was literally a whole day of cheerleading and 1 reading class. And then I interviewed with Wolfarth, our previous principal. And that same day, Alamo Heights offered me the job. And I realized after talking to Wolfarth, I would much rather work here. And so I called him and I said, they offered me the job. And he said, well, let me call you back in a couple hours. And a couple hours later, he said, it's yours. And yeah, that's how I ended up here. And then the next day, MacArthur said, we have a job for you. It's like, sorry, I already accepted at Steele.
That's great. That's awesome. Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, this is your first official teaching gig after getting your master's?
Yep. 11 years I've been here. This is my 11th year.
Okay. So you'll be completing 11 years and Steele's your one place. So we have that in common too. I mean, I've been here for 15 years and I've never been anywhere else. And I went through alternative certifications. So I never had a, what you call it? Student teaching like everyone else does. I did some substituting when I was in Lubbock. When I was once I realized I wanted to get into teaching, I just went out and really just did it to make some extra money. But I also knew that I was, wanting to maybe get into education. I actually used to be a substitute teacher at the Buddy Holly Elementary School.
Nice.
Yeah, in Lubbock. So, all right. So that's why, you know what, Jackie, that's why I like doing these, because the whole purpose behind the podcast is really selfishly for me to get to know who I work with. And it's my intention that if we get to know each other on a personal level, we can connect to each other to where we can better serve our kids. If I can't reach a kid or talk to a kid, I know your story. I know where you went to school. I know that you've got dual degrees. I know your upbringing with 2 different types of parents. These are things that can connect this kid to you if they can't connect to me. And so, I've learned 2 things about you that we share in common with our backgrounds. So just a little bit about teaching. Obviously you've been here for 11 years. Looking up here, I have my little white sheet of paper that we got a couple of years ago, and it says why. So my question is what is your why? Why do you teach?
I have 2 answers.
Okay.
The first one is how I even got my education master's was not my original intention. I knew I wanted to get my master's, and I loved actually my minor of mass communications, film, radio, and television. So I applied for film, radio, and television for my master's. And I basically put it as, okay, God, this is what you want me to do. I'm going to do it. But I also knew I needed to have an additional thing. I've been a coach since I was in high school. I coached all the way through college, team coaching, cheerleading, gymnastics, tumbling, everything. So I've always loved working with kids. And I said, okay, why not go ahead and do education? So I left it up in God's hands. And I didn't get into my radio, film, and television. I got into education for my master's. I was like, okay, that's
all right, let's go.
Need to do. So that was semi of my why, but really it was the second part where I have always loved working with kids. Reagan Leach, I have known since she was 4 years old, not because I've been here, because I coached her when I was in college.
Yeah.
So she's also a reminder of why that I enjoyed doing that. And as I've been here for so many years, I have students that come back every year to be able to say hi to me. They tell me things of, this is what you did for me. This is something that stood out to me. You can't reach every kid. You're never going to. That we all know that. But those ones that you really can connect with and you make some type of impact, that's what really matters. I've been to now 3 weddings for former students that they want to be part of their special day just because they remember it. So, and 2 of them, the weddings, both of them were in the same class period. So in my first period, I have a couple, and we were talking about it because one of the weddings was just only a few weeks ago. And I said, yeah, they've all been in the same class. And they said, I guess that's good luck for us.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I just had a student ask me this week, Coach, someday when I get married, would you go to my wedding if I invited you? And I was like, of course. And she was like, really? And I was like, why would I not? Like that to me is all why I teach. I want to be able to say that I had some kind of impact on you. Matter of fact, just side tangent here. I finished my bucket list. I created this bucket list probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, when I used to teach counseling and mental health, but I never finished it. I never finished coloring it and all that kind of stuff. And somebody asked me one day, like, Coach, you have a bucket list? What's on it? I was like, matter of fact, I do. Let me go get it. Anyway, so I just finished it and it's hanging up on my wall over there. And I was able to check a couple of boxes because one was on the very first one says, have a healthy child. And I was like, all right, check, right? The other one is go skydiving. I was able to check that one off. But one of them says, be a teacher that a student will always remember. And then just today, a student was reading it and they're like, Coach, I'm always going to remember you. Go ahead and check that off. And I said, no, you don't understand. Because in my age, if I go back and think about, and actually this is a good segue into my next question for you anyway. If I were to think back to the most impactful teachers that I had in my life, I can narrow it down to 2. I remember a lot of them, but they don't fit the same category of the teacher that I will always remember. And I said, so you might be able to say that now, but I want you to be able to say that in 10, 15, 20 years, then I can check that box because you remember me now because I'm your teacher and it's now you're in the present. But when you go back, and I said, I don't take this disrespectfully, I may not be the teacher that you will always remember. I want to be that one. Not one of 5 or 7 or 10 that, oh, remember Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. or Coach so-and-so. I said, I want to be the one. And the only way that I'm going to know that is by someone coming back to tell me that I'm that one teacher. You and I both, as well as many other teachers, have all talked about your why and how, we're here in this profession for the kids. We're here for when they come back and they tell us, thank you. We're all about that, right? That's when I'm going to be able to find out. I've got kids that come back and say hi and all that kind of stuff, but that doesn't make me the teacher. So I said, nope. So I said, if I am that teacher, make sure you come back in 15, 20 years. So segue into the next question is, who is a teacher that you will always remember? What was it about them that made them stand out amongst the rest? Elementary, high school, doesn't matter when.
It's from high school, and really, technically it's 3, but you can combine it into 2. My first one was my pre-AP English 2 teacher, Miss Harrington. When I think back on the idea of the whole master situation, getting into education, she was one of the people that popped into my brain of her passion, the way she tried to do English differently to connect with kids and just do stuff. And she was an older teacher, close to retirement. She just I just remember how she was that stern, but she tried to make it fun. Even though she wasn't one who necessarily joked or did any of that, she had her own little way of trying to be able to do it. And she pushed me beyond what she had to, because she knew I could. The other two, they're a married couple. And the reason why they're one, they never go anywhere without each other, like at all. They were both at Churchill, and one was my science and the other one was my eco, and they just were amazing. We had the pleasure at Northeast of being able to go to Costa Rica our senior year. For those of us that were environmental science AP, they were together, of course, because they couldn't go without each other, but they took a group of us, and it was a wonderful experience. We got to be really close to them, to know them on a personal level. Their daughter actually, when I was in dance, she was the assistant dance director. Her daughter was around all the time. And because of social media, we've always been able to keep up and be able to see what's happening. And I also get to look at their retirement, because they just retired in December, and what they're doing with their lives, and how they still always make it a point to those students that they clearly made a connection with. They always comment on our feeds or whatever, and everything like that, that it meant something.
What was her name?
And Mr. and Mrs. Mayer.
Mayer, okay.
Yes. And Miss Mayer, she's one of those AP, she does the AP tests, every year, and has written the textbooks and all that stuff. So yeah, she's one of those.
I think it's interesting to think, because like just the imagery came to mind of you in high school, gravitating towards these two teachers who are married and inseparable and all that kind of stuff. And then you look at yourself now, a teacher with your husband in the same school, and you're like,
it's different. They would try to go have lunch together and everything. Everybody comments around here, do you ever talk to each other? No, we don't. We live together. We don't need to talk to each other at school. We'll say hi and we're good to go. So no.
I always tease Courtney, because I talk about, Jeremy and Courtney and then you guys. And I'm like, you know what, babe, it'd be really nice if you were to come teach at the high school. Then I could see you. We can have lunch together. And then you go back and you think, okay, but wait a minute, like I'm in coaching mode and like I'm always doing film sessions or something rather, but it's still a special thing to be able to do that. All right. So without mentioning a student's name or students, just share like a pivotal moment in your educational career so far that you have just been totally impacted by. We kind of talked about a teacher that you'll never forget. Like, what is a moment so far in your career that you'll never forget, that's kind of had a pivotal moment in your life?
I had a student a few years ago who was forced down here from New York in the city. He was starting to go down a not so great path in regards to drug dealing and everything like that. And his mom was a single mom, and it was her last ditch effort to try and make sure that he didn't go somewhere. And he moved in with an aunt. He really didn't talk in classes. He had a chip on his shoulder. He would have an attitude without being overtly rude to teachers. His writing was amazing. Like I can't even, this is when I used to still teach English 1, English 2, and he took the star. He scored a perfect score on the essay, which English teachers will understand. That's almost impossible. It's only 5% of the entire population of the state that does that. He was just that incredible. And I told him one day, do you know what you're going to do? And he said, I don't know. He's like, I'll get a job, whatever. I said, you got to think about becoming a novelist and writing. Mm-hmm. So that's all he would do. I would end up actually even changing some of his assignments, because he wouldn't do just a regular assignment. He would refuse to do it. Said, write instead, and give him just a writing prompt. And he would do that to show what skills I was asking.
Right.
And at the end of the year, he told me, I might think about doing that. That does sound like something I'd enjoy. It was the first time I ever saw him smile, was when he did that. And it was just like, I was able to realize you just have to watch for how you can connect with some of those kids that are completely disconnected from everybody else.
Yeah, I wish you could see like my skin. Like I just got goosebumps all over my body, because those are those pivotal moments that we're after. Mm-hmm. Those are the affirmations that we're in this career for the right reasons, is pulling the best out of students, they've got to meet us halfway and they've got to be willing to do it. But man, when that student, I bet you just rocked your world when he came back and he was like, yeah, I think I might do this. You just want to like, smile from ear to ear and just like you get choked up, just thinking about that kind of stuff. So I'm glad you shared that story because that's exactly what this is all about.
Yeah.
It's whether it's English, whether it's writing, whether it's teaching kids about the medical field, it doesn't matter. Try to bring the best out of all your students. All right. So I'm kind of on this kick. I've read the book by Carol Dweck, The Growth Mindset. Have you read that book by chance?
I've heard the title, but I haven't read it.
Fantastic book. It just talks about the difference between being growth minded and fixed minded. And I'll leave it at that, but it's a great book. And it just has me thinking personally about things that I can do in my own life and in my own profession to improve. How can I improve as a husband? How can I improve as a father? But educationally, what can I do to improve as a teacher? I've kind of coined the phrase a couple of years ago when I was doing a lot of my speaking engagements and stuff. And it's just one of those things where like, what do you do personally to improve at your craft? Or are we so, cut and paste, if you will, you know what I'm saying? So like, what are some things that you do to improve at teaching?
I'm trying to see if I have it right by me, but one of the things I do is I plot out an entire 9 weeks, like this, right? So I know my general, here's what I'm doing. And if I have the title of it, I know what it was. Then I go through and I make notes on it, which I already have notes like at the top of this one to be able to say what worked, what didn't, what ideas I want to have for next year so that I don't forget about it. And it kind of makes me, at least on the smallest aspect, think, oh, okay, here's how it could improve at least this activity or this day. And then from there, I also, at the end of the year, always ask students like what their favorite thing was, what did they least like, what can I do to improve? And I try to incorporate those responses along with the notes that I have to be able to kind of look at the bigger picture of, okay, how could I make this better and be able to make students, enjoy it and try to learn it more.
Yeah, I just interviewed Ms. Hartson, and she did something very similar where she surveys the students. And I think that's a great thing to do. A couple of years ago, I put my kids on camera, and I don't know if you saw the videos or not, but I put them in the skills lab, and I said, this is a volunteer basis, but I would just love your feedback. Just tell me one thing that I did really well and one thing that I sucked at, and so they willingly, I mean, golly, it was like one kid after another. They just kept going in and they pretty much all participated in it. And going back to that growth mindset, I was searching what I sucked at. Like I know what I do well. I connect to kids. I try to create a fun environment. Kids trust me, that they're able to tell me things and connect. But I was like, I really wonder from a kid's perspective what I don't do well. And I don't know what it was, but that year I just must have been really stressed out. And they were like, your stress, when you come into the classroom stressed, it stresses us out. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I've always thought that I held it in and not, portrayed it onto others. And clearly I didn't that year. And I was like, man, okay, I need to dial back, when I am stressed out, because how selfish of me to, do that to where it's affecting their learning. That's not fair to them. So, whether it be a survey, whether it be a video or just jot down on a sheet of paper, I think those are great ways for us to improve as teachers. All right. So kind of on the same note here is, what is one thing that you struggle with as a teacher versus one thing that you feel very confident in as a teacher?
Confidence is connecting with a lot of the students. Again, I think that there's some students, it's just like we as adults, you don't always get along with everybody. So you don't always make those strong connections, but I try to. And I feel like I do a fairly good job with it. So I feel like it's pretty confident. I have plenty of kids that nighttime or whatever it is that they're still on campus, they come in to be able to just chit chat with me in a different class period or, whatever it ends up being. In terms of struggling, I don't like being wrong, but I try to tell the kids, I'll admit when I'm wrong with stuff. I don't like it though. And so when they call me out, I'm like, okay,
Take a breath.
I gotta accept it and, talk it through. And it's a struggle for me that I don't like being wrong. And pretty much everybody who knows me can say that that's true. And I mean, we're all going to end up making mistakes. We're always going to end up having that. And so when a kid can end up pointing out something, I'm like, okay, I can always end up learning from my students though. And so I always have to remind myself of that. Not that I can't do it, but just kids can teach you stuff. And
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes you just are in those, like you said, the stress mood or whatever mood that you're like, I just don't want to listen to what you're saying. That, no, you have to know that there's those stressful times are probably the biggest times when they can actually be teaching you something, whether it's content, your personality, how you're dealing with the situation, everything. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm glad you said that because it's so true. And not to call people out, but like if you're not learning from your students, you got your blinders on or something like that, because kids, I mean, they're 16, 17, 18 years old, and we can learn from them too. We're all in this together. But you made me think of another book, because I love to read, and that's Failing Forward. I don't know if you ever read about that. But in every mistake or failure, there's always that opportunity to learn, right? Ms. Hartson, what did she write down? It's productive failure. Be productive in your failures, because then it's not a failure. It was a learning opportunity. So very true. All right. So in your opinion, and only opinion, what separates the ideal favored teacher versus maybe the teacher that students really don't care to go into your class? You know what I'm saying? So just kind of generalize. What do you, from a student's perspective, like, what do you think kids gravitate towards versus least favored?
Those that listen, I think, is a big part. Sometimes the kids come in and they just start telling you about something bad that happened or something great that happened or whatever it is, or they just need to vent. Because I know I have a couple kids in my class this year that when they go home, they don't have anybody to talk to because the people at home don't want to listen to them.
Yep.
And a lot of times that's what they need. And I know that there are sometimes teachers that have a difficult time with that because they don't want to, especially with the negatives, they just don't want to hear it. But many times that's how you're going to get the kids to actually listen to you, is if you listen to them. I know that especially teachers that have already retired, you talk about the two different types of teachers. Of the old school, where it was you go in, you lecture, the kids are expected to do the work and they listen to you, and that's kind of it. We don't live in that world anymore. We don't live in a world where you automatically deserve respect. And while maybe we think that it should be that way, this generation, you have to give them respect for them to give you respect.
Yeah.
And I think some teachers struggle with that concept because it is hard to go from that old style mentality, but it is the way that it is now. And you have to be willing to adapt and change in order to be able to continue connecting with your students.
Yeah, I know. I love that. It reminds me of generational learning. Even when we have like our in-service days when we, listen from, Ruby or whatever. I think they had a conversation of, generational learning back in the 30s. This is, how it was 40s, 50s, or whatever it is, Generation X or Generation Y or whatever. We have to know what kids want. How do they learn best? And if we don't, then we're, like I said, cut and paste kind of teachers, and we're doing what we want, but that doesn't always best serve the students. So very true. And listening is always important because, these drama queens or whatever they've got going on in their lives, like, okay. And I said this in a previous episode, spelling, how do you spell love? And it's Time. You spend time with them. That's simply put, that's how you spell it. You give someone time. And if they're seeking attention, give it to them. I mean, why? What is it really going to affect? You can't be so content driven that you can't spend 2 minutes to share a moment of listening to a kid. And there's an episode in the movie Freedom Writers where she steps out in the hallway to talk to her kid about the paper, the self-assessment he turned in, and he gave himself an F. And she was like, what are you tripping? That scene right there is so important. And I use that in my presentation because in that, I think it's 1 minute and 54 seconds of a conversation between a teacher and a student outside in the hall. She was able to reach and connect to that kid like 13 different times on different levels, from home life to self-assessment to needs to, educational status. And she connected to him 13 times in less than 2 minutes. But yet we don't want to give a kid who's crying in the class or someone who just wants to vent like you talked about, right? I mean, come on, 2 minutes. So I'm glad you said that. That's so true. Okay. So if you could change, I got 2 more questions for you. Number 1 is, if you could change anything in education, what would it be?
Testing.
All right. Simply put, right?
I especially, I know many of the other core will probably agree with stuff, but I think that English is a really tough subject to test because it's just like when we are grading essays, it's very much subjective, and you can give a rubric all you want to, but ultimately I don't see how 36 lines of an essay you can actually, say whether a kid is, I don't know. I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with it. I do the IGC projects with the seniors that didn't pass it and have to go through and make them do all of these skills all over again and stuff, and the stress that it seems to cause them. And it's just, yes, testing.
I got you. All right. Well, Jackie, so wrapping up this podcast episode with you, I always like to give teachers an opportunity to thank a teacher on campus. And I'm going to ask you for a favor. One person, if you can, I want you to, give you a chance to give a shout out to someone who has just impacted you, who's helped you, who's always been in your corner. Can't name Steve, but anybody else that you would like to give a shout out and a thank you to. So who would that be and why?
Courtney Matthews. When I started senior 6 years ago, she was level lead and basically just gave me everything and said, here you go, use what you want to, what you don't, just lose it. And she made sure that I was never trudging water, that I was always okay. She checked in on me all the time. And since she has done dual credit, we have still always bounced ideas off of each other. She's helped me, I've helped her. And when we did class sponsor, we just had the 2 brains that were perfect with each other. She has that creative, just driven mindset and just goes with everything and knows how to do stuff. And I had that very much administrative mindset of, I'll do the paperwork, I'll do all that. And it just, we threw one of the best proms ever, and had so much money left over that we were able to get the water fountain that we did for the school. And so I feel like she's just a great person, and she definitely has continued to help me out.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you guys are hearing this. Shout out to Courtney Matthews. She is an amazing person, and honestly, that's why I told her she was going to be my first episode. But she's an amazing person. I'm glad you gave her a shout out and a thank you. But my thank you goes to you right now. Thank you for taking some time on your Friday afternoon. I hope I give you some time to at least kind of plan and prepare for next week. But again, thank you for spending time, and I hope you have a blessed weekend.
Thanks. It was awesome.
All right. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Keeping Up with the Knights. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure you subscribe and click the notification button so you know when the next episode is released, and then share it with your friends and colleagues. If you're so inclined to do so, would you please rate and review this podcast to help me grow our community of listeners? I hope there was something that you heard today that allowed you to connect outside the classroom. Now, more than ever, we need each other as a support system, and we need to continue to make this the best high school in the state of Texas. Thank you, Knight Nation. Now, go be someone's champion today.